Medical professionals of Reddit, what's the worst sex-related injury you've seen at your workplace? Exotic, special ordered venomous spider up the ass. Guy called an ambulance because he wasn't sure if he could put bug bite cream up there too, as the packaging said, for external use only. Lost entire transverse section of necrotic bowel. Lift, but poops in a bag now. Mini lava lamp stuck in the rectum. Power cord was sticking out like a tail. Broken penis. Dude's testicles were the size of grapefruits. I assume the internal pudendal artery was pumping blood into them from somewhere. Was an MA then, now in med school. Was a neat injury, but nothing we could do for him in urgent care. He needed surgery for sure. Did see a bottle stuck in a rectum's ray as well. I'm not one to judge. Keep on freaking on, but don't put glass in your ass please. Countless cases of stuff stuck up the butt. Dildos, vibrators, cucumbers, toilet bowl brushes. If it's possible to get in the butt, someone has needed it surgically removed. Toilet bowl brush was the most shocking. However, the funniest was reconstructing a giant white, oddly realistic weenie on the back table to make sure they had pulled it all out. Edit. Pro tip. If you get something stuck up your butt, don't make up some fantastic story about naked light bulb changes. We know how it got there. You know how it got there. There's no shame in liking butt stuff. Just tell us your personal time went away. I used to work weekend night shifts. Had a younger girl come in one weekend. Despite her age, she had a hip replacement and it was dislocated. ER put it back in and away she went. Next weekend, she's back again. Same thing. Third weekend in a row and there she is. Finally I ask what she's doing to dislocate her hip, and she says her boyfriend keeps bending her leg back too far during sex. I told her to try different positions. Dude stuck a pencil up his urethra. Wood is porous. It got stuck. For a day. He couldn't pee around it, and initially that's what his complaint was, urinary retention. Finally in the exam room, when the doc asked him what with the eraser sticking out of his did the guy fess up. He ended up needing surgery. He was also 70-ish. Old enough to know better. Uncle-in-law, anesthesiologist, had a patient come in that had poured concrete in his own ass while trying to make a custom dildo. They had to chisel the concrete out of his rectum. Back in medical school, I was on a surgery rotation with a classmate. Our first day we got split into groups. By chance, my first case was an appendectomy. By chance, his first case was helping deliver a jewel-encrusted dildo from the rectum of a 250-pound guy. He was at the business end when it crowned and was responsible for catching as the surgeons pushed from above. Janitor heated petroleum jelly and injected it into his dick with a syringe. He was trying to make his dick bigger. He added more. Other janitors saw him and decided to do the same. So turns out with nowhere to go, petroleum jelly forms granulomas under the skin, which get infected. Word was the tip of his dick and the base wouldn't get hard anymore, only the middle. And abscesses formed, resulting in what was described as the dick looking like maggots had bored tunnels through it. Janitor 1 was hospitalized for several weeks. As for Janitor 2, he ended up with several ulcerating wounds in his pelvic region. You could stick a finger in them, they were that big. Apparently injecting your dick with petroleum jelly is fairly common. Some girls have also attempted to inject their boobs so give themselves implants. It has led to deaths, because bits and pieces of it can dislodge and travel to the lungs. Don't do it. Typical not a medical professional, but I had a friend who was a hospital pharmacist. He said a patient came in with a coffee thermos in his ass. Cap first. He got the rest of the thermos out, but the cap stayed. After a couple days he finally decided to go to the hospital, because he couldn't get it out. The cap ended up festering bacteria, and he had part of his colon removed. Now that guy's in his 30s with a colostomy bag. Worked at a physical therapy clinic for years. 78-year-old man herniated a disc in his neck eating out his girlfriend. He was a long-time patient and friend of the therapist, so we got the whole story. Our patient, P, was old, rich, and single, and loved all the sleazy bits that came with it. One day his 39-year-old girlfriend asked him to return a favor. So P goes down on a woman for the first time ever at age 78. Not really knowing what he was doing, he went at her like a dog drinking water, his words. A few moments later he felt a pop and his arm went numb. He came to us with a nearly useless left arm about 2 days later. My boss was laughing so hard during the eval that I went in the treatment room to check on him. He insisted I stay and hear the whole story. P died a couple months later from something unrelated. I miss that crusty old a lot. I've seen a crystal clear imprint of a clothing iron to the ass. The thought process was something like, if candle wax equals kinky, ironing your ass equals mega kinky? I don't know. Also a pair of junkies got high and shot heroin in the guy's dick, and we had to fill it the whole thing. He was distraught about the size difference. I had a patient come into the ER with runs of ETACH, dangerous arrhythmia, because his boyfriend sprinkled methamphetamine powder on a dildo and stuck it in his ass, very absorbent up there, and suddenly your heart is crapping out at a rate of 220. Kinda sex related. On Andrew's AFB in the 80s, a guy was caught molesting his daughter by his wife. As the cops arrived, he sat on his front concrete steps and hammered his junk off. My mom worked on him in the emergency room. He still ended up in jail. 18-year-old kid had a cheap dildo break way up his ass. Was bleeding from his butt. Needed surgery. In my state you're not legally an adult until 19, so he had to call his mom for consent, and she demanded staying with him through his entire ER visit. Edit. His butt ate the entire dildo. Probably a solid 7 to 9 inches of plastic. Top 2 inches is what broke off. Also yes, the medical consent rules are screwy. Applies for sexual assault as well, unless the parent was the suspected assailant. Not my story but my mom's. She used to work in the oncology department of a hospital a while back. One day she comes home, sits me down, and says, syphilis in the eye. You always make sure your partner is clean. Don't take their word for it. I don't care what you do. Just, syphilis in the eye. That's all I needed to hear. Labial hematoma. Couple had sexy times. Then got into a fight. He kicked her in the crotch. This burst a blood vessel in the labia, which made it swell to the size of a large pear. That hurts. She used many colorful words to describe what she thought of him. My friend works at an ER in a small rural area in Canada. Apparently this young guy comes in and has a can of Axe body spray stuck in his rectum. He was extremely embarrassed, and his excuse was that he accidentally sat on it. A guy came into the emergency department because his ass hurt after his boyfriend was fisting him. It had torn his bowel. He had to get a colostomy. It wasn't like life-ending or anything, but imagine going to the ED after 6 and getting told you're getting a king colostomy. Nothing worse than dildos, vibrators and other objects stuck where the sun don't shine. One chap did say that he likes sticking things up his ass, and that's fair enough. But the strange excuses are usually the most entertaining part of it. Worst genital injury was a guy who drilled his scrotum with a cordless drill doing DIY. Don't secure your workpiece between your knees if you want to be sure to keep both testicles, gentlemen. Infected penile implant. His darn looked like a purple tall boy beer can. They had to take him to the OR, literally fillet his man parts, take out the implant, and wash it all out. Worst part, they left it open for several days. Ike. A co-worker was getting divorced. One night his soon-to-be ex called about something, and she could tell he was having a bad day, so to cheer him up, she told him all about how, while she and her new boyfriend were having sex, he shoved a dildo up her ass and it just got up. After failed attempts to remove it, they went to the ER, where she got surgery to remove it. After surgery, doctors sanitized the dildo and returned it to her. This story did not make him feel better. My family is constantly in and out of our local ER. Last time I went there for a concussion, there was a man in there with his wife for heart palpitations during coitus. He started having a slow heart attack while they were having sex, and they ended up admitting him. There was also a girl in there, high as the king's son, claiming she'd had sex with multiple different guys, like 3 or 6, and gotten pregnant from all of them, but that her friends had kidnapped her afterward to San Diego and given her a peculiar brownie with pot in it that I didn't know was pot, and the pot brownie made her lose her baby, and now she was dying. According to the conversation the doctors kept having with her, she'd come in 3 times in a month claiming she was pregnant and worried about her baby. Each time they tested, and all tests proved negative. She started her period, and it caused her to insist she'd lost the multiple men's baby, and that the pot brownie in San Diego was at fault 3 days before. She started wailing when they gave her meds to calm her down, claiming they were killing her baby with pot and injections, and that she'd call up her friends who kidnapped her and forced her to eat this deadly pot brownie as proof. I'm not sure what ended up happening to her and her apparently psychotic break, but I'm hoping they got her some help because she was clearly out of it. Dentist here. In dental school definitely saw a girl with an inflamed palate that she was worried about an infection. Did some tests, nothing looked infectious. Faculty member pulled us aside and was like, yeah, that's a bruise from deep throating. Might not be a major injury, but definitely memorable. Was working an ER rotation at a major DC hospital while getting my EMT. I wasn't around at the onset, but a gentleman came in complaining about swelling down there, and a nurse gave a cursory look. She immediately took him into a private room, closed the door, and came over to tell us what was going on. The guy apparently liked the feel of weight on his balls when he got off. So he had put his wang and balls through the center of a 5-pound weight plate, like you would put on free weights, and gotten off. He then fell asleep. 5 hours later he woke up, swollen and unable to pull himself out of the weight. He had somehow taken public transportation, or walked, with a 5-pound weight plate in his pants all the way to the hospital. We spent the next 30 minutes trying to reduce the swelling by putting crushed ice up against him without success. Finally the charge nurse called the CFEMS to get assistance from the heavy rescue squad to cut through the plate. We took the guy into the psych room, closed the door, and proceeded to cut it off, it being the weight, not his manhood. The entire time having to keep applying more ice to the plate so that it didn't become hot enough to just cauterize his groin. The other patients really didn't appreciate hearing a buzzsaw, screaming and seeing all of the ER staff giggling. Of course the poor guy also had to deal with a constant stream of doctors/nurses/techs having to go in there to check on something and see what it was all about. My stepdad is an ER doctor in the only hospital in the city I was raised in. There was no place else to go when the sex swing my idiot boyfriend hung on drywall ceiling came crashing down and I broke my tailbone. He was also there 6 months later when that same boyfriend let go of my hips as he was going at me pretty hard from behind, sending my over the edge of the bed and head first into a desk. The wife was a conservative Christian and therefore did not own a dildo. Her weapon of choice was the handle of a bladed-edged potato peeler. She would grab by the blade with a folded in half toilet paper roll. Yeah, I already know this sounds insane. Anyway, her husband came into their bedroom when she wasn't expecting it, and instead of a showbox or a pillow or jacket or literally anything else, she stuffed it up the old cooch to hide it. He was feeling frisky, and I guess she was too scared or embarrassed to say no or admit what she was doing. Thus, bottom 2 inches of his dick were sliced almost in half. By the way, this is the story we pieced together in the nurse's station. May have happened a different way. Edit. Oh, by bottom I meant tip. I forgot men think of the tip as the top. Sorry. I'm not a medical professional, but worked as a physician scribe in an emergency room for a year, and here is my best/worst. We had a patient come in one night around 2:30 or so, our favorite time, since bars close at 2 o'clock. Charts says 58-year-old male with his chief complaint equals foreign body. Okay, cool, I'm thinking maybe a bar fight, where me being a student gets to see some awesome anatomy up close. Go in the room with the physician, and it's a guy in an all khaki trench coat. I imagined that was it, the day I died from a terrorist. Not during my deployment to Iraq, but in a goddamn hospital by an old dude. We ask him to have a seat on the bed and he says he can't. Yes, this is heading where you think. In talking, he says he has one inside of him. When we ask him one of what, he opens the coat and pulls out the large bottle of natural ice beer. The brown bottle. That's like as big as a goddamn 1 liter of Coke. Glass. Doc asks which end he inserted first and of course it was bottleneck first. So once he got it deep enough, shwoomp, and his colon said mine. Nothing like having to have emergency surgery in fear of a glass bottle being crushed by your colon. Aside from that, my runner-up was a 17 years old male with an iPhone in his ass. 17 man. If you're into bud stuff, just use toys, and do so with care, to not push the limits please.